Throughout its 60 years of existence, Doctor Who has cultivated a passionate and devoted fan base. And throughout the thick and thin, the highs and lows, we've had some great experiences associated with it along the way. So to commemorate a franchise 6 decades old, we at the Whoniversals want to explore some of our fondest memories that we have formed as fans of this beautifully unique show.
If I were to be asked what my very first memory of Doctor Who was, I would have to say Doomsday. More specifically the scene in which Jackie and Pete reunite, and later on the scene in which the Doctor and Rose are split apart. I can't say why I specifically remember these things, I was 3 years old, but they're the only things that left an impression on my little 3-year-old brain. I didn't really watch much Doctor Who when I was very little. I only have very splintered memories. The very first time, however, I knew I was watching Doctor Who consciously was Silence in the Library, Forest of the Dead. To my little 5-year-old brain, it was the scariest thing I had ever seen. The idea of little creatures who live in the shadows who can eat you alive, and the repeating noise of, "Hey, who turned out the lights?" was terrifying to me. I also think I latched onto not every shadow, but any shadow. And that for a while stuck in my brain, leaving me with a quite long-term fear of the dark. Then comes the significant gap. Like I said before, I never really watched Doctor Who consistently. It never hooked me as a child. I was more into other sci-fi, like Star Wars. Then comes secondary school, and I meet my current best friend. He's been a massive Doctor Who fan since he was a little boy. So, in order to better understand his interests and possibly become a fan of the show, I decide to tune into the next series as it airs. Unfortunately, said series was Series 9, and said first story was The Magician's Apprentice. Now, anyone who knows me remotely well will know that it's my least favourite Doctor Who story of all time. 2017 rolls around, I'm once again with my best friend, and he says, "The new series of Doctor Who's starting tonight, can we watch it?" I, not wanting to be a rude guest, say, "Sure," thinking it'll pass an hour. Then the pilot airs, and it clicks. I'm suddenly a Doctor Who fan. In those 50 minutes, I got it. I understood. I loved so much about that episode. 12's character, the pacing, the writing, everything. But mostly, I love Bill. Bill, being a very open and proud lesbian, really spoke to my confused teenage brain. And I hadn't yet realised that I was bisexual. Didn't occur to me at the time until maybe a couple years later. But seeing her be so open, proud, curious, wide-eyed, this amazing character, really, I think, helped me realise who I am. And I don't know if Pearl Mackie's ever going to see this, but if she does, thank you.
My earliest memory of the show is the scene in Daleks in Manhattan where I can best describe it as Dalek Sec voring the dude who I've forgotten the name of right now. I think I also have a very distinct memory of finding out there were other doctors than David Tennant, because I was thinking, oh, it's the Doctor and Rose, and when I was told that dude in the leather jacket, well, I was very young. I was told that the dude in the leather jacket in Bad Wolf was the Doctor, and I was thinking, oh, is this Rose? But it was Linda. Feel free to make a meme based on that. Is this Rose? I actually distinctly remember a nightmare that I had when it was sometime between Stolen Earth and Journey's End airing. I think everyone has stories about that week. I only have one, and it was like the nightmare I had that week. And I got exterminated by a Dalek, but only my top half. So, like, it just... There was, like, an alternate camera angle where I was, like, on the Dalek ship. So they didn't kill me. They just kidnapped the upper half of my body.
So, my first memories of Doctor Who, I have talked about this before, but for the purposes of this video, I shall mention them again. My earliest memories are actually of the first 2 episodes of the revived series, Rose and the End of the World. And my memories, I must have watched them, or at least part of the episode at least, but these 2 memories stick out. And in the case of Rose, it's when Mickey Smith gets sucked, is looking inside the bin, gets his hand stuck on it, looked very sticky, and then the bin opens itself out and flips him in, his legs dangling before it closes its lid and bursts. And that was a scene that stuck in my mind, and when I saw the episode, when I watched the BBC Three repeats in late 2006 to catch up with series 1 and 2, that, as well as the next episode scene, were like, oh, that's where I know it from. The other clear memory is the scene where Rose talks to Raffaello, the blue-skinned janitor in The End of the World, which then sees her being pulled into the ventilation shaft by the robotic spiders, Cassandra's robotic spiders that she sent to sabotage Platform 1. And we see her being pulled into the ventilation and her legs wriggling out as she's being pulled in and presumably killed. It's something about these two scenes that feature legs wiggling in mid-air as they're being pulled into something. Mickey was being flipped into the bin and Raffaello being pulled into a ventilation shaft. So it's something to do with legs flapping in mid-air, or sort of mid-air in Raffaello's case, as they're being pulled into something.
I mean, I remember being sad Rory died in Cold Blood. I later realized, it's weird. I had this fascination with certain male characters and male celebrities, and then I realized I was bisexual, and then it all made sense. I had crushes on those dudes. Rory was one of them.
My first memory of Doctor Who would be around about summer 2006 when Series 2 was airing. I happened to sort of come across one of the episodes on broadcast for some reason, and I sort of sat down and started to watch this episode. Kind of unfortunate to some, this episode was the Idiot's Lantern, and I just remember sort of the vivid memory of Magpie sort of being grabbed by the wire. Yeah, it was kind of a weird experience, but then you got sort of the time vortex coming in afterwards, and then afterwards you got like the Doctor and Rose in their 50s sort of hairstyle, and I was like, okay, right, I can probably enjoy this and that. You know, that's kind of where really it starts. So my next memory is around about autumn 2008. I'd started getting more into the show by this point. So I remember sort of reading Doctor Who magazine at the time and finding out that Paul McGann, this guy who played the Doctor once in a television movie, was doing ones on the radio. And I remember looking at the article and thinking, oh, right, this is new Doctor Who, right? It's not with David Tennant, it's not with Chris Eccleston. It's one of the classic Doctors that I slightly recognised, because at this point I'd watched stuff on UK TV Gold and I had a couple of DVDs at that point. I think I actually had the TV movie as well. I just remember sitting down with the radio and listening to Dead London, which ended up being sort of my first Big Finish audio I ever listened to, really. And I just remember enjoying it because it was like, again, new Doctor Who, old Doctor, and then you got sort of this weird kind of plot with the 4 areas of London. And no, it was really just exciting, and it was great to hear Paul McGann, and that's how he sort of became my favourite classic Doctor for a while, until some of the box sets that he was appearing in.
One of my favourite memories to do with Doctor Who was actually my 24th birthday, which happened on the 2nd of April 2022. Wales Comic Con, hosted in Telford, was set to happen on the same weekend that encompassed that day. And 5 actors who played the Doctor were scheduled to make an appearance there. And I just thought, that's just too good of an opportunity to waste. So, me, my partner Hugh, and former member of the channel Jean, we collaborated to rent an Airbnb for that weekend, and then we all turned up at that convention on the 2nd of April with bestie leak YouTuber Tharies. I'm pretty sure this was my first big convention as well. I'd definitely gone to other smaller events before, but this was my first of the, London or San Diego Comic-Con sized events. And it was like, that experience, it was so unashamedly nerdy yet completely open and casual. And that was so refreshing, especially in comparison to, say, online circles, where nerdy environments can get a bit competitive. And not only did I get to say hi to Nicola Bryant and have a photo op with Catherine Tate, but I also got to meet all 5 Doctors who were present that day. Sylvester was the first one up, and while I was getting him to sign Remembrance of the Daleks, Hugh pointed out, like, how giddy with excitement I was. And I just responded to him like, look, I'm starstruck, I can't help it, okay? And that comment prompted Sylvester to get up from behind his desk and walk over to my side and lightly tap me on the arm. And then he said, there, you have now been starstruck. Although if you want, we can make it like Will Smith at the Oscars. And that's one of the best things I've ever heard. I also got to meet and have a photo op with Peter Davison, who was polite through gritted teeth, but that's just Peter Davison in any fan interaction for you. And I also got to meet and have a photo op with Paul McGann, who's just very naturalistic. I also got to meet Colin Baker. I'd met him a couple of times before. I'd got him to sign The Last Adventure like a month earlier, but this time I wanted to be unique because Colin Baker, in his old age, is kind of notorious for being a big fan of Crocs, and I thought to myself, wouldn't it be absolutely wacky if I bought a pair of Crocs and brought them to the convention and got him to sign a pair of Crocs? We know you like Crocs, so how about signing Crocs?
That'll be my first. Top or bottom? There you are.
There they are, baby. I was scheduled to have photo ops with both Colin and Sylv, but I missed out on both of them, unfortunately, and I also did something to my foot because it was really aching by the end of the day, but those were the only real downsides, especially when you consider the fact that I had all 5 doctors wish me a happy birthday, because I was wearing a happy birthday pin badge, and all 4 classic doctors acknowledged it and said happy birthday, but also I had a photo op with David Tennant, and, you know, photo ops are very, you know, go in, have, say, a quick comment, take the photo, move on. And in those brief 5 seconds with David Tennant, he looked at me, and just he was on something that day, like, I don't know, crack, coffee, just a general high from knowing that he was dragging a sack full of cash home, but he saw me, and was, oh, happy birthday! But in his, like, Scottish accent, and that's a high I'm never going to forget. All 5 doctors there, like 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10, just all acknowledging, you know, me being 24 years old. That's amazing.
Getting to meet some people at conventions is like, you're meeting your heroes, and they say never meet your heroes, but as long as you don't have too high expectations, because they are people too, they're just doing their job, it's great. Like meeting Andrew Cartmel and Paul Cornell and you know, Paul McGann and Sylvester McCoy, as I said, and Julian Glover. It's sure there's been some awkward ones, but like Katie Manning was also just a joy. She was an absolute joy, and you know, meeting Sophie Aldred, it's like when you're awestruck, you're always going to be like awkward, and you know, the first person you meet at a convention is always going to be the one that you have the most cringe experience with.
And I'm once again with this best friend. I had been watching and re-watching all of New Who, and we finally both agreed that it's probably time I dip my toe into classic Doctor Who. But where to start? Well, first we decided on the Doctor. Based on the clips that I'd seen, 4 seemed like my favourite. So, where to go from there? The all-time classic Genesis of the Daleks, the claustrophobic horror masterpiece, Horror of Fang Rock? Nope. The Talons of Weng Chiang. No, I do not recommend it. Given its length, its shocking racism even for the time, it's not a great jumping on point for new viewers. But it worked. I got hooked. I don't know why. Maybe it's the P-super atmosphere, maybe it's the fact that I was already relatively used to serialized storytelling, or maybe it was just Tom's captivating performance. I don't know. But that unleashed a tidal wave. It was during this journey to watch all of Classic Who that some of my fondest memories of the show were formed. Essentially, in sixth form, me and my friend would always have Friday afternoons off. So we would go back to his place and we would just watch any story that he could think of, because I was still a novice. And we would always go to the same fish and chip shop, order the same thing, and then head back to his place to continue the binge. And I associate so many stories with that lovely smell of salt and vinegar, and getting out of the cold winter nights back into his place to watch stories like the Aztecs, the Moon Base, Inferno, Horror Fang Rock, and The Happiness Patrol are all stories that stick in my mind due to this very significant period. And I don't think I would be as much of a Classic Who elitist as I am now without these formative times. So thanks, mate.
To be a bit cynical for a second, I find it absolutely hilarious. Like, I used to really hate Clara, and it was only until very recently until I started to open the door to possibly enjoying her a bit more. But I didn't like her in 2015. So when Face the Raven aired, the day after it aired, I was on a call with Ollie Everett, who you may know as being a member of the channel, and he when I went onto a Skype call with him, we were still using Skype back then. Can you imagine? It's all Discord nowadays, but yeah, when I went on a Skype call with him, I just played Ode to Joy.
Clara flipping dies, and I'm happy.
I was an edgy 13-year-old. Like, leave me alone. It's just a funny moment I thought I'd share.
In 2015, around about Christmas Day, I witnessed the episode that sort of made me quit the fandom for a bit. I did not like the Husband Zero song. Nowadays, I'm a bit ambivalent towards it, but back then it was like... Series 9 had been a bit middly, so I knew at that point that I just didn't think the show was any good anymore. So I ended up sort of quitting the show for a while, and then around about the summer, I remember kind of going into, I think it might have been CEX at the time, and finding the Sarah Jane Adventures and Torchwood and that. And at that point, I was old enough for Torchwood, but I'd already seen most of the Sarah Jane Adventures. But I think sort of collecting those box sets again and watching them just made me really feel like I was missing something here. And sort of watching them again just really sort of brought me back into nostalgia and that. And I think really it kind of did birth the wild fact that I'm a really sort of big Russell fan, because I think this also got me into sort of a lot more of his non-Doctor Who work as well. But because of Torchwood and Sarah Jane and collecting them again, I ended up watching Class when it came out, and seeing Capaldi's Doctor in that first episode was the spark that sort of brought me back to Doctor Who. So when I turned on Return of Doctor Mysterio, that was where I started to sort of really get back into the show again. But if it wasn't for sort of Torchwood and Sarah Jane at that point, and then sort of getting into Class, I don't think I would have gotten back into the show. So I kind of really have to thank sort of the spin-offs at that time.
Another favourite memory of mine with Doctor Who is actually watching the 50th anniversary special on broadcast.
When Day of the Doctor aired itself, I was just so hyped.
I love Doctor Who, and the 50th anniversary is going to happen in a few minutes after I upload this. I'm so excited. I can't wait.
And when I got the DVD for it that Christmas, I just watched it over and over and over again.
My favourite memories of Doctor Who, however, are when I was watching the 50th anniversary special, The Day of the Doctor. I was just like in super fanboy geek mode, and in honesty, the power of the Doctor made me feel the same thing. Although whilst my opinions on that story have kind of gone down a little bit, dwindled a bit on later rewatches and thinking about it, Day of the Doctor, it's kind of stayed up there. I mean, yeah, I can still pick out the faults and the nitpicks, and there might have been some bits that could have been handled better, but that still remains my favourite story even to this day.
Because obviously throughout the year the hype was building up. I was like, oh my god, 50 years of Doctor Who, oh my god, missing episode returns, oh my god, 5-ish Doctors reboot, An Adventure in Space and Time, Night of the Doctor, yada yada yada. And the hype was so strong, it actually got a couple of my normie friends in secondary school who didn't really care about the show. They dropped off, like with Matt Smith's first series. Even got a few of them back into it. Like, they were intrigued about the hype with David Tennant coming back. And so on that day, literally like within 5 minutes of the episode airing, they all came around my house and we all sat down to watch Day of the Doctor together.
But watching that episode was just an absolute spectacle, and that was on telly. I can't imagine how people in the cinema must have felt, especially in the 3D screenings. I mean, the Saving Gallifrey bit especially, that's got to be one of my favourite moments of the entire show. That one was just absolutely awesome especially on first viewing. That was just so good. That was so wonderful.
It was electric. The hype was through the roof. Like, I still remember my immediate reaction to Billie Piper's first appearance as the moment in the episode, or when they reveal that it's not statues, it's actually Zygons, you know, masquerading in cloths. And of course there's the saving Gallifrey scene where we sort of went into overload, like, what does this mean? Capaldi's appearance and then Tom Baker turning up at the end. I just remember, like, I was like, it's Tom Baker. It's Tom Baker. Yep, there he is. There's Tom Baker.
I mean, I then moved into being cynical towards it because everyone was cynical towards the Moffat era and Dave the Doctor in particular. On my most recent rewatch, I just felt like a kid again, like 10 years ago. And it was honestly a magical experience to watch it.
And when the episode ended, we just turned off the TV and we just sort of sat in a stunned silence for 20 to 25 minutes, just contemplating what this all meant, like how it honoured the past of the show, what it meant for the future of the show. Even like my normie friends who only really saw Eccleston and Tennant, even they were invested. Even they were hyped up. And I say this without hyperbole. At the time, Day of the Doctor was everything I wanted it to be. And it's kind of a shame because 10 years later, it's not really an episode I care much about. It's very there for me. It's very whatever. But that will not take away from the initial experience I had with it first watching. It was great when I first watched it, and I will always remember that initial experience with it fondly. That was a high of my fandom with Doctor Who.
This is gonna be soppy sounding, but the best experiences I have to do with the show are the friends I met along the way.
And I'd just also like to throw in that I've made some great memories with friends and fellow fans.
Going to conventions is one thing, but going to conventions with friends, like, honestly, the atmosphere that you can generate with someone who you're friends with, or even people that you've just known online, have been, you know, somewhat acquainted with, and then you're just gonna spark and have some fun when you're at a convention. Or even at the BFI, which is kind of like a convention in itself.
The BFI hangouts have been some of my favourite get-togethers. That very first one I went to, City of Death, it wasn't the first screening, but it was the first hangout with friends. That was a great experience, meeting Matt, John and Will for the first time. Also shout out to Strange Folk, I met them for the first time there too.
I was there for the Galaxy 4 animation, I was there for the City of Death. I was there for the Time Meddler as well.
And that was all great. And then Revelation of the Daleks, it was great to watch that story on the big screen and hung out with Ben and Will. The Abominable Snowmen is also another strong one because that was the first time I think 5 of us had gotten together, at least in any one place.
Meeting up with the likes of Joseph Lidster and Simon Guerrier, and it's fun. Like, and everyone gets progressively drunker, so you get progressively more insane, and it's just a fun time being with a bunch of like Doctor Who fans.
So it's been great to hang out with these guys and a couple of other fans like Lord Slar, for instance. It was great hanging out with him, and also meeting several other great well-known fans like Dominic Martin, Mr. TARDIS, Crystal D, and many others across the events.
My final memory is September 2021. I just remember really feeling sort of down that day, and I ended up reading the news that afternoon, and it turned out that Russell T Davies was coming back as the showrunner. That, I think, has been sort of one of the best days to really be a Doctor Who fan in these last couple of years, honestly, because I wasn't ready to give up on Doctor Who again. And it was just more the fact that it comes to that point where it started to sort of mesh together. But finding out Russell, coming back was just magical, to be honest. It was some great news, and here we are near the anniversary specials, and I can't wait, honestly. Everything that's been said and everything that's been sort of told to us, it just makes me can't wait for it. So yeah, there you go.
I also remember first engaging with Doctor Who content online I don't know what my first interaction with Doctor Who content was, but I remember that's around the time I started watching Five Who Fans, and if you know anything about this channel and their channel, you can see a lot of similarities early on. But I hope we've kind of, even though it's very clear where this channel's DNA comes from, I hope we have issued our own flavour.
During lockdown, I started a Twitter account because I was bored. And through that Twitter account, I took place in the watch-alongs, and I met so many of the people I know today. Back when Will was still on Twitter, that's one of the first time I interacted with him, and I just viciously mocked him, which hasn't changed much.
Evil Will.
Evil Will be like, I'm straight.
How do we be the victim of a hate crime 101?
I met everyone else as well. I started watching the Whoniversals. I joined the Discord server. I started an ongoing joke about how I would join the channel.
I'm not a Whoniversal yet, for I am a spy within the Whoniversals.
And then it happened. As much as this last year has been painful for me, for reasons I won't go into, both the channel and everyone around me have really helped. And obviously, if I hadn't been a Doctor Who fan, I wouldn't know these people.
One other favourite memory with Doctor Who was actually finishing all of Classic Who, because I started watching Classic Who like in 2007 when my dad gave me a VHS tape of Resurrection of the Daleks, and I have many fond memories of when my stepbrother Adam would come over, like stay over for the weekend, and in the early morning we just put the VHS of Resurrection of the Daleks in and we just watched that. And I still remember, Peter Davison lying down on that table, the bubble wrap table, having his memories extracted and the pain he was in. Very strong memories of that. And the Movellan virus canisters in London, I love that story so much, but that's besides the point. But my journey with Classic Who was kind of slow to start with. I had seen some of the classics, like Tomb of the Cybermen, The Mind Robber, The Robots of Death, Pyramids of Mars, The Five Doctors, so on and so forth. But it was only really stories that my dad just had as he was selling home media, and a lot of Classic Who stories he just didn't have in his arsenal. It would be stories I'd actually have to go out of my way to get. And as a kid, I was just more content to stay with New Who, which just comes on and is more readily available. But eventually I did start amassing the DVDs, but I was very hands-off with watching them. I'd only really watch them if I felt like them. But in 2015, I was starting to waver out of my fandom with Doctor Who. I was more interested in Sonic the Hedgehog, of all things. That is until Series 9 aired, and my initial reaction to Series 9 was overwhelmingly negative. I hated that series with a burning passion. I don't really care about it nowadays, but that sharp sting of hatred after that long period of apathy sort of reminded me of why I loved Doctor Who in the first place. And I was worried that, the fact that I hated Series 9 would make me fall out of love with the show, which obviously a little dramatic, but whatever. But I wanted to fight to stay invested. So at that point I was like, right, I'm going to finish watching Classic Who. I finished watching all of Davison. For some reason, Arc of Infinity was the last Fifth Doctor I had to see. I powered through all the Tom Bakers. I then focused on the missing episode reconstructions because I had a particular fascination with the missing episodes, probably because it's the you want what you can't have kind of effect. Where it's like, oh, you can't see these, but that's kind of interesting in a way, isn't it? But come partway through 2016, I only had a handful of Pertwee stories left, and the final decision of what my last Classic Who story would be came down to a decision. Would it either be Monster of Peladon or Inferno? And I knew Monster of Peladon wasn't particularly popular, and I knew Inferno was pretty much universally loved, so I was like, right, I want to finish my Classic Who marathon on a bang. So that's what I did, and when I reached the credits of Inferno Part 7, that satisfying feeling of completion, knowing I'd seen everything in those 26 years, and I'd ended on a brilliant story as well, and I'd agreed with the consensus on that, that felt so good. That That's one of my favourite Doctor Who memories. And not long after that, they announced the Power of the Daleks animation, so my classic Who preference just grew stronger from there.
There is one story which I watched for the first time that I have a fond memory of the situation surrounding, and that was when I first watched Snake Dance. Now, what could possibly be special about that? It was the final Doctor Who story that I needed to watch before I had seen all of it. And that, I was originally going to make a whole video about it, but that just didn't happen. But I recorded it with Will, and honestly, I cherish that, and I thank him for being with me, and it was an honour to have him share those moments of me completely losing my Classic Who virginity? Oh no.
I also started getting into Big Finish in 2020. I have a serious problem, and I don't think there's any way to help me with it. Rest in peace, my bank account.
Here's to the memories, and here's to more memories. That's it from me. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.
I think that's it. Wait, there is one more thing. So when I went to Paris...